The bullet missed Garrett Masterson's head by 3 inches. He didn't flinch, didn't dive for cover, just stood there in the darkness of his barn, listening to the ricochet scream off the iron feed trough behind him, waiting to see if the shooter had the stones for a second try. In the silence that followed, broken only by the nervous shuffle of horses in their stalls, Garrett realized something that would change everything. Whoever wanted him dead wasn't afraid anymore. And that meant war was coming to Caldwell Flats. But before I tell you about the blood that would soon stain the Montana dust, before I show you how a man who'd built walls around his heart finally let someone in, before you see how this town would tear itself apart over a mail-order bride and stolen cattle, I need you to understand one thing. Garrett Masterson never asked for any of this. He just wanted to be left alone. If you're watching this from your city tonight, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. I want to see just how far this story travels. Hit that like button, because what happens next, you won't believe it. 3 months before that bullet, Garrett Masterson stood in the Caldwell Flats post office, holding an envelope that smelled faintly of lavender and feeling like the biggest fool in Montana territory. "Something wrong with your mail, Masterson," Tobias Crane called from behind the counter, his voice carrying that particular brand of amusement reserved for other people's discomfort. Garrett didn't answer. He just tucked the letter into his coat pocket and walked out, his boots heavy on the wooden planks, aware of every eye following him down Main Street. In a town of 300 souls, a man didn't get many secrets. And a letter with a woman's handwriting? That was front-page news. The October wind cut through Caldwell Flats like a knife through butter, sending dust devils spinning down the rutted street. Garrett pulled his hat lower and made for his horse, a big roan gelding tied outside Harper's Mercantile. He could feel the stairs burning into his back. Mrs. Donnelly pausing mid-sweep outside the boarding house. Young Billy Watts stopping dead in his tracks with an armful of firewood. Even old Frank Mercer looking up from the bench outside the barber shop where he'd been whittling the same piece of pine for the last 5 years. Let them look. They'd been looking at Garrett Masterson his whole life, and he'd never given them a damn thing to see. He swung into the saddle and pointed the roan toward home, toward the 1,500 acres of the best cattle land in 3 counties, toward the ranch house he'd built with his own hands and filled with exactly nothing worth coming home to. The letter burned in his pocket the whole ride. By the time Garrett reached the Circle M Ranch, the sun was dropping behind the Bitterroot Mountains, painting the sky in shades of rust and gold. His foreman, Chuck Dawson, was closing up the barn, a stocky man of 50 with a face like weathered leather and the kind of loyalty you couldn't buy. "Boss?" Chuck nodded, reading something in Garrett's expression. "Trouble in town?" "No more than usual." Garrett dismounted and handed over the reins. "Cattle count?" 143 head in the north pasture. Lost 1 heifer to a cat, looks like. Found the carcass this morning, half eaten. "Mountain lion?" "Big one from the Prince. Want me to track it?" Garrett shook his head. "Cat's just doing what cats do. We'll move the herd closer in for a few days, see if it moves on." Chuck studied him for a moment. "You sure everything's all right? You got that look." "What look?" "The one that says you're about to do something crazy." Garrett almost smiled. "Almost. Go home to your wife, Chuck. I'll see you tomorrow." He watched the foreman ride off toward the small cabin at the edge of the property, then turned toward his own house, a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch and windows that looked out over the valley. He'd built it 5 years ago with help from a crew of men from Butte, had made it bigger than one man needed because somewhere in the back of his mind, he'd thought maybe someday it wouldn't be just him. That was before he'd accepted what the town already knew. Garrett Masterson was meant to be alone. Inside, he lit a lamp and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey before finally pulling out the letter. The envelope was cream-colored, good-quality paper, addressed in a neat, feminine hand. No return address, but the postmark said Louisville, Kentucky. He opened it carefully, aware that his hands that could rope a steer or break a wild horse without trembling, were suddenly unsteady. "Dear Mr. Masterson, I hope this letter finds you well. My name is Eliza Callaway, and I am writing to you regarding the advertisement you placed in the Matrimonial Times. I understand that you are seeking a wife, and I would like to be considered for that position." Garrett stopped reading and reached for his whiskey. He'd placed that advertisement 4 months ago, on a night when the silence in this house had been so loud it hurt. He'd been drunk and angry and tired of eating alone, tired of waking up alone, tired of the way Mrs. Donnelly looked at him with pity every Sunday after church. He'd written it in a fit of whiskey-fueled honesty and posted it the next morning before he could change his mind. Seeking, wife. Must be of good character and willing to work. Ranch life is hard. I am not an easy man. No love promised, only honesty and protection. Write to Garrett Masterson, Caldwell Flats, Montana Territory. He'd gotten 3 responses. The first had been from a widow in Ohio with 6 children looking for a father. The second had been from a woman who'd enclosed a list of demands that included servants, a piano, and regular trips to San Francisco. He'd burned both letters. This one, he kept reading. I am 23 years old and in good health. I have been raised by my aunt and uncle since the age of 12, when my parents died of fever. I can cook, sew, keep a house, and I'm not afraid of hard work. I do not expect love, Mr. Masterson, but I do expect respect and honesty in return for the same. I must be honest with you about my reasons for writing. I am in a difficult situation here, one that has become increasingly dangerous. My uncle has passed, and his brother, who has now taken control of the household, is not a man I can remain near. I need to leave, and I need to leave soon. I understand if this makes you reluctant to consider me, but I wanted to be truthful from the start. If you are still seeking a wife and are willing to correspond, I would very much like to hear from you. I can provide references from my minister and from the women I work with at the church auxiliary. Respectfully, Miss Eliza Callaway. Garrett read the letter 3 times, then walked to the window and stared out at the darkening valley. A difficult situation. Increasingly dangerous. A woman didn't use those words lightly. He should throw the letter away. The last thing he needed was someone else's trouble landing on his doorstep. He had enough of his own. Instead, he found himself at his desk, pulling out paper and pen, writing words he'd regret by morning. The response came 2 weeks later. Miss Callaway, I received your letter. I'm not going to pretend this is a romantic situation. I need a wife. You need to leave Kentucky. That's the deal. Ranch life is harder than you probably think. Winters here can kill you if you're not careful. The nearest neighbor is 4 miles away. The town doesn't think much of me, so they won't think much of you either. If you're looking for social standing or an easy life, look somewhere else. But if you can work hard, keep your word, and don't expect me to be something I'm not, then we might make this work. I can promise you protection, a roof over your head, and enough to eat. I can promise you honesty. I can't promise you'll be happy. If that's enough, write back. If not, I understand. Garrett Masterson. He mailed it before he could change his mind, then tried to forget about it. The cattle needed moving to winter pasture. The barn roof needed patching before the snow came. The fence line on the eastern property was weak in 3 places. He had work to do. But 3 weeks later, when Tobias Crane handed him another cream-colored envelope with that knowing smirk, Garrett felt something shift in his chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Mr. Masterson, I appreciate your honesty, and I will return it. I am not looking for romance or easy comfort. I am looking for safety and a fresh start. I can work as hard as any person, and I keep my promises. You say the town doesn't think much of you, but I have learned that small towns rarely think well of anyone who doesn't fit their narrow definitions. I am not concerned with winning popularity contests. I am concerned with building a life that is my own. I understand that Montana winters are harsh. I understand that ranch work is demanding. I understand that you are not offering me a fairy tale. But Mr. Masterson, I need you to understand something too. I am stronger than I look, and I am braver than you might think. I would not be writing to you if I had any other choice, but that does not make me desperate or weak. It makes me determined. If you are willing, I propose we correspond for the next month. We should know more about each other before making such a permanent decision. Ask me anything you want to know. I will answer honestly. And please, call me Eliza. Respectfully, Eliza Callaway. Garrett read that letter sitting on his porch as the first snow of the season began to fall, fat white flakes drifting down from an iron-gray sky. She was right. They should know each other better. Marriage, even one of convenience, was a hell of a thing to undertake blind. He wrote back that night. Eliza, fair enough. Here's what you should know about me. I'm 32 years old. My father died when I was 17, left me this ranch and a pile of debt. I spent the next 15 years building it into something worth having. I don't drink much, don't gamble, don't run around. I go to church when I feel like it, which isn't often. The preacher doesn't like me much because I don't pretend to be holier than I am. I'm not mean, but I'm not particularly warm either. I don't talk much. I don't smile much. I work from dawn to dusk most days. I expect the people around me to pull their weight, and I don't make excuses for myself or anyone else. The town thinks I'm cold. Maybe they're right. I've never been good with people, never saw the point in pretending friendship where there isn't any. That's made me enemies over the years. Preacher Dunbar, who runs the church, thinks I'm headed for hell. Half the businessmen in town think I'm too big for my britches. The women think I'm a lost cause. But I pay my debts, I keep my word, and I don't lie. If you come here, I'll make sure you're safe, fed, and housed. I'll defend your name and your honor. I won't raise a hand to you or speak cruel words. I'll treat you with respect as long as you do the same. That's who I am. If it's enough, tell me who you are. Garrett. Her response came faster this time, just over a week. Garrett, thank you for your honesty. Here is mine. I am 23. My mother was a school teacher, my father a shopkeeper. They were good people who died too young. My aunt and uncle took me in, raised me as best they could. My uncle was kind. My aunt was dutiful. When my uncle died last year, everything changed. His brother Thomas took over the household and the shop. He is not a kind man. He is a man who believes he owns whatever is in his reach, including me. When he started touching my shoulder in ways that lingered too long, when his eyes started following me in ways that made my skin crawl, I knew I had to leave. But a young woman alone with no means and no family has very few options, until I saw your advertisement. I am not fragile, Garrett. I have scrubbed floors until my hands bled. I have nursed my uncle through his final illness, sitting up night after night. I have stood in that shop and dealt with drunks and bullies and men who thought they could speak to me however they wanted. I learned to be steel underneath the silk. I don't need you to love me. I don't even need you to like me. But I need you to keep your word, and I need to know that when I close my eyes at night, I will wake up safe. Can you promise me that? Eliza Garrett sat with that letter for a long time, snow falling outside, the fire crackling in the hearth. He thought about the kind of man who would make a young woman feel unsafe in her own home. He thought about the courage it took to write to a stranger in Montana and propose marriage as an escape. He thought about the steel underneath the silk. And he wrote back, Eliza, yes, I can promise you that. Come to Caldwell Flats. I'll marry you, protect you, and keep my word. In return, I need your word that you'll stay. This isn't a temporary arrangement. I'm not looking for someone to run off the minute things get hard or someone better comes along. If we do this, we do it for good. There's a train from Louisville to Butte City. From there, you can take the stage to Caldwell Flats. The trip will take about a week, maybe more depending on weather. Wire me when you're leaving, and I'll meet you when you arrive. One more thing. The town is going to talk. They're going to make assumptions about you, about why you're here, about what kind of woman marries a stranger. Some of it will be cruel. If you can't handle that, tell me now. But if you come, Eliza, I'll stand between you and every word. That's my promise. Garrett. He mailed it the next morning and tried not to count the days until he heard back. The telegram came on a Tuesday in late November, delivered by Billy Watts, who was practically vibrating with curiosity. Telegram for you, Mr. Masterson, the boy said, his eyes wide. Come all the way from Kentucky. Garrett took it, flipped the kid a coin, and closed the door in his face. Inside, his hands were steady as he unfolded the paper. Arriving December 3rd, stop, stage from Butte, stop, Eliza Callaway. 5 days. He had 5 days to prepare for a wife. The next morning, he rode into town with a list: new bedding, decent curtains, food supplies. He needed to make that house look less like a bachelor's cave and more like a place a woman could live. But the moment he walked into Harper's Mercantile, the whispers started. Heard she's a mail-order bride. What kind of woman? Must be desperate. Mrs. Eleanor Harper, who ran the store with her husband, looked at Garrett with something between pity and disapproval as he set his list on the counter. So the rumors are true, she said, her voice pitched just loud enough for the three other women in the store to hear. You're bringing a wife from back east. That's right. Garrett met her eyes, his face expressionless. Don't you think that's, well, rather rash? You don't even know this woman. Don't see how it's your concern, Mrs. Harper. A flush crept up her neck. I'm simply thinking of the poor girl, coming all this way to marry a stranger. It's not decent. I'll take the bedding, the curtains, and these food supplies, Garrett said, putting money on the counter. And I'd appreciate it if you'd keep your opinions to yourself. Well, Mrs. Harper's mouth pinched into a tight line. I was only trying to— I know what you were trying to do. Garrett's voice was quiet but edged with steel. Same thing this town's been trying to do for years. But I'm not asking for your blessing or your approval. I'm asking you to sell me supplies and mind your own business. He could feel every eye in that store on him, could practically hear the gossip starting before he'd even made it to the door. But he didn't care. Let them talk. They would anyway. Chuck was waiting outside, leaning against the hitching post. Heard you're getting married, the foreman said, not bothering with preamble. News travels fast. Always does. When's she arriving? December 3rd. Chuck whistled low. That's 5 days, boss. You ready for this? No, Garrett admitted, loading his supplies onto the wagon. But I gave my word. What's she like? Don't know. We've only exchanged letters. Jesus, Garrett, that's crazy. Garrett climbed onto the wagon seat. Yeah, I know. I was going to say brave. For both of you. Chuck squinted up at him. Need any help getting the house ready? I'd appreciate it. Over the next 5 days, Garrett and Chuck worked like madmen. They scrubbed every surface in that house until it gleamed. They hung the new curtains, made up the bed with fresh linens, stocked the pantry and the root cellar. Chuck's wife, Mary, came over and added what she called woman's touches, a vase for flowers, some embroidered pillowcases, a rag rug by the bed. She's going to be terrified, Mary said on the evening of December 2nd, arranging dried flowers in the vase. Coming all this way to marry a man she's never met. You be gentle with her, Garrett Masterson. I plan to. Do you? Mary turned to face him, her round face serious. Because that girl's going to need kindness, not just protection. She's going to need to know she made the right choice. I'll keep my word to her. That's not what I'm talking about. Mary shook her head. But I suppose you'll figure it out, or you won't. Either way, be patient with her. That night, Garrett barely slept. He kept thinking about what Mary had said, about what Eliza must be feeling, traveling across the country to marry a stranger. He wondered if she'd changed her mind. Wondered if she'd step off that stage and take one look at him, at the hard lines of his face, the coldness everyone said lived in his eyes, and get right back on. He wouldn't blame her if she did. But when the stage rolled into Caldwell Flats at 3 o'clock the next afternoon, and the door opened, and a young woman stepped down into the Montana dust, she didn't run. She was smaller than he'd imagined, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with dark hair pinned up under a simple blue bonnet, and eyes that were somewhere between brown and gold in the afternoon sun. She wore a traveling dress that had seen better days, and she carried one small trunk and a carpet bag. Those eyes found him immediately in the small crowd that had gathered, because of course half the damn town had shown up to gawk, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then she walked straight toward him, her back straight, her chin up, and said, Mr. Masterson? Yes, ma'am. He took off his hat. Miss Callaway? Eliza, please. She held out her hand, and when he took it, her grip was firm and steady. Thank you for meeting me. Of course. He was aware of every stare, every whisper. Let me get your trunk. I've got it. He lifted the trunk like it weighed nothing, which it nearly did, and gestured toward his wagon. It's about an hour's ride to the ranch. You must be tired from your journey. I'm all right. She followed him, ignoring the looks, the whispers. He helped her onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her. As they pulled out of town, Eliza didn't look back. She looked forward, toward the mountains, toward the vast empty landscape that would be her new home. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Garrett glanced at her, surprised. Most people from back east thought Montana was just empty and hostile. You think so? I do. She pulled her cloak tighter against the wind. It's big. Bigger than I imagined. It's lonely, he warned, especially in winter. I've been lonely in a crowded house, Eliza said. At least here the loneliness is honest. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the wind across the grass. Finally, Eliza spoke again. In your letters, you said the town doesn't think much of you. Was that them back there, the people staring? Yes. They seemed more curious than hostile. Give them time. Garrett kept his eyes on the road. Once they decide what they think of you, it'll turn. And what will they think of me? That you're either desperate or foolish, maybe both. She was quiet for a moment. Then, are you always this cheerful, or is this a special effort for my benefit? He looked at her sharply, but she was smiling, just a little quirk at the corner of her mouth. I'm being honest, he said. I know. I appreciate it. She pulled her carpet bag closer. But you should know, Mr. Masterson. Garrett. She tested the name. You should know that I didn't come all this way to be defeated by gossip. I've survived worse than small-town whispers. Have you? Her smile faded. Yes, I have. They didn't speak again until the ranch came into view, the house sitting solid and strong against the darkening sky. Eliza sat up straighter, taking it in. You built this. Me and a crew, 5 years ago. It's lovely. It's solid. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. That's what matters. He helped her down, carried her trunk inside. Chuck and Mary had left a lamp burning and a pot of stew warming on the stove. The house smelled like home, or what home should smell like. Eliza stood in the middle of the front room, slowly turning, taking in the rough-hewn furniture, the stone fireplace, the curtains that Mary had helped him hang. This is your room, Garrett said, opening a door to a bedroom he'd prepared for her. I'm upstairs. You'll have privacy. She looked at him, something flickering in her expression. We're getting married tomorrow, aren't we? If you still want to. I do, but we're not. She gestured between them. This is an arrangement, not a real marriage. I know. He met her eyes. I won't expect anything from you that you're not willing to give. That was part of the deal. Thank you. She looked relieved. I appreciate your honesty. There's stew on the stove if you're hungry. I'll leave you to get settled. He turned to go, but her voice stopped him. Garrett? Yes? Thank you for keeping your word, for bringing me here. She looked small in that big room, but her back was straight, her eyes clear. I know this is strange for both of us, but I'll do my best to be a good wife to you, in whatever way that means. I know you will. He nodded once. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Upstairs in his own room, Garrett lay on his bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft sounds of Eliza moving around downstairs. A woman in his house. A woman who would be his wife by this time tomorrow. What the hell had he done? But it was too late for second thoughts now. He'd given his word, and Eliza had traveled 2,000 miles based on that word. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, even if neither of them had any idea what they were getting into. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Garrett was up before sunrise doing his usual chores, trying to pretend this was just another day. But his hands shook slightly as he shaved, as he put on his good suit, as he hitched up the wagon for the ride back to town. Eliza was waiting in the kitchen when he came in, wearing a simple dress of deep green that brought out the color in her eyes. Her hair was pinned up, and she'd put on what little jewelry she had, a small locket on a thin chain. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. She took a deep breath. Garrett, before we go, is there anything you want to ask me? Anything you want to know? He thought about it. Do you have any regrets? About coming here? She shook her head. No. Whatever happens, this was my choice. I don't regret it. Good. He offered his arm. Then let's go get married. The ride to town was quiet. When they arrived at the church, Garrett was unsurprised to see it nearly empty. Chuck and Mary were there, and a few of the ranch hands who'd worked for him over the years. That was it. Preacher Dunbar was waiting, his face set in lines of disapproval. Mr. Masterson, he said stiffly. Miss Callaway, I presume. Yes, sir. Eliza's voice was steady. I must say, I have reservations about performing this ceremony. Marriage is a sacred covenant, not a business arrangement. And yet you'll take my money for it just the same, Garrett said flatly. Can we proceed, preacher, or do you need to deliver a sermon first? Dunbar's face reddened. I'm simply saying, I know what you're saying. You've made it abundantly clear over the years what you think of me. But Miss Callaway didn't come 2,000 miles to hear your opinions. So either marry us or don't, but make up your mind. For a moment, it looked like Dunbar might refuse, but then Eliza stepped forward. Preacher Dunbar, she said quietly, I understand your concerns, but I assure you I'm here of my own free will. I'm making this choice with my eyes open. If you perform this ceremony, you'll be helping me start a new life. Isn't that worth something? Something in her voice, in the earnest way she looked at him, made the preacher pause. He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Very well. Let's begin. The ceremony was brief. Garrett spoke his vows in a voice that didn't waver, promising to honor and protect. Eliza did the same, her voice clear and sure. When Dunbar pronounced them man and wife, Garrett leaned down and pressed a brief, respectful kiss to Eliza's forehead. She looked up at him, something like relief in her eyes. It's done, he said quietly. Yes, she whispered back. It is. They signed the register, accepted congratulations from Chuck and Mary, and left the church as quickly as they could. But not before Garrett caught sight of Mrs. Harper and her friends watching from across the street, their faces full of judgment and speculation. Let them watch. He had what he came for. On the ride back to the ranch, Eliza was quiet. Garrett glanced at her a few times, trying to read her expression. You all right? He finally asked. I'm married, she said, as if testing the words. I'm Mrs. Masterson now. You can still go by Callaway if you want. No, she shook her head. I'm Mrs. Masterson. That's who I am now. She looked at him. Are you having second thoughts? No, you? No. She smiled, just a little. But I won't lie, Garrett. I'm nervous. About what comes next. About whether I can be what you need. I just need you to be yourself, he said. That's all. Just be Eliza, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. She nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. All right, we'll figure it out together. When they reached the ranch, the sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Garrett helped Eliza down from the wagon, and for a moment they stood there in the fading light, two strangers bound together by vows and necessity, and something neither of them could quite name. Welcome home, Mrs. Masterson, Garrett said. Eliza looked up at the house, at the vast sky above them, at the mountains in the distance. Then she looked at him and smiled. A real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. Thank you, she said, for giving me a place to belong. And standing there in the Montana twilight, Garrett Masterson realized that maybe, just maybe, he'd found one too. But belonging was one thing. Keeping it was another. And in Caldwell Flats, nothing worth having came easy. The first week of marriage passed in a strange rhythm of careful distance and awkward politeness. Garrett rose before dawn each morning, dressed quietly in his room upstairs, and came down to find Eliza already in the kitchen, coffee brewing and breakfast started. They ate together in near silence, punctuated only by requests to pass the salt or inquiries about the weather. Then he'd disappear into the work of running the ranch while she tackled the house with a determination that bordered on fury. By the end of that first week, every floor had been scrubbed, every window cleaned, every dusty corner vanquished. Chuck remarked that the place had never looked better, and Mary brought over some of her preserves as a welcoming gift, staying for tea and asking gentle questions that Eliza answered with practiced ease. But at night, when Garrett lay upstairs listening to Eliza move around in her room below, he wondered if this careful coexistence was all they'd ever have. A business arrangement, two people sharing a house but living separate lives. On the 8th day, everything changed. Garrett was in the barn repairing a bridle when he heard the wagon coming up the drive. He stepped outside to see Eliza returning from town, her back rigid, her face pale beneath her bonnet. She pulled the wagon to a stop with more force than necessary and climbed down without waiting for help. What happened? He asked, moving toward her. Nothing. She began unloading supplies, her movements jerky. Everything's fine. Eliza. I said everything's fine. She grabbed a sack of flour, nearly dropping it. Garrett caught it, took it from her hands, and set it aside. What happened in town? For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then her composure cracked, just slightly, and he saw the anger blazing in her eyes. Your town happened, she said, her voice tight. Your wonderful, hospitable, Christian neighbors. Garrett's jaw clenched. What did they say? Does it matter? She pulled off her gloves with sharp, precise movements. It's exactly what you warned me about. I'm the desperate mail-order bride who trapped the poor, lonely rancher. I'm either a fortune hunter or a fool, and they can't quite decide which. Who said this? Mrs. Harper, Mrs. Donnelly, that woman from the boarding house. I don't even know her name. They were in the mercantile, talking just loud enough for me to hear, about how quickly we married, about how suspicious it all is, about how I'm probably already pregnant with some other man's child and needed a husband to cover my shame. Her voice broke on the last word, and she turned away, pressing her hands flat against the wagon. Garrett felt something dark and cold settle in his chest. Did you say anything back? What would be the point? Defending myself would only make it worse. Anything I say will be twisted. She took a shaky breath. I just bought what I needed and left. I won't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Look at me. When she didn't move, he stepped closer. Eliza, look at me. She turned, and he saw the tears she was fighting, saw the steel underneath struggling to hold. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I knew they'd talk, but I didn't think they'd be that cruel. Not this fast. You warned me. I should have been prepared. No one can prepare for that kind of venom. He squeezed her hand. Listen to me. Those women don't matter. What they think doesn't matter. You're my wife. That makes you a Masterson, and Mastersons don't answer to small minds and smaller hearts. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Mastersons sound like a proud bunch. We are, and we stand by our own. He released her hand, immediately feeling the loss of that small contact. Next time you go to town, I'm coming with you. You can't protect me from gossip, Garrett. No, but I can make damn sure they know there's a price for it. Something shifted in her expression, something grateful and surprised. Thank you. Don't thank me. It's what a husband does. He picked up the flour sack. Come on, let's get these supplies inside. Then I'll teach you to shoot. She blinked. Excuse me? You're a rancher's wife now. You should know how to handle a gun. Mountain lions, wolves, sometimes worse things on two legs. You need to be able to protect yourself when I'm not here. I've never shot anything in my life. Then it's time you learned. He carried the flour toward the house. Meet me behind the barn in 20 minutes. 30 minutes later, Eliza stood behind the barn with a rifle in her hands, looking uncertain and determined in equal measure. Garrett had set up a row of tin cans on the fence posts, and now he stood behind her, close enough to guide but not so close as to make her uncomfortable. It's going to kick harder than you expect, he said. Plant your feet. Keep the stock tight against your shoulder. Breathe out when you squeeze the trigger. Don't pull. Which can am I aiming for? Any of them. Just hit something. She raised the rifle, sighted down the barrel, and fired. The recoil knocked her back a step, and the shot went wide, kicking up dust 3 feet to the right of the fence. Your stance was too narrow, Garrett said. Try again. She did, and again, and again. By the 6th shot, she'd knocked over 1 can, and by the 10th, she was hitting 2 out of every 3. Garrett watched her face as she concentrated, saw the way her jaw set with determination, the way she refused to give up even when her shoulder was probably aching from the recoil. Good, he said when she'd knocked down the last can. You're a natural. She lowered the rifle, flushed with pride. Really? Really? A few more practice sessions and you'll be able to hit a wolf at 50 yards. I don't know if I could actually shoot a wolf. You will if it's between you and the chickens, or between you and you. He took the rifle, ejected the remaining rounds. The point is knowing you can if you have to. That's power, Eliza. That's the difference between being a victim and being someone who can fight back. She studied him for a long moment. Is that what you are? Someone who fights back? Always have been. It's the only way to survive when people are determined to tear you down. Who's trying to tear you down? He hesitated, then decided she deserved the truth. Most of the town, at one point or another. They don't like that I built something bigger than their sons did. Don't like that I don't bow and scrape to Preacher Dunbar or the town council. Don't like that I call things as I see them instead of pretending everything's fine. Sounds lonely. It is. He met her eyes. But it's honest. And I'd rather be lonely and honest than liked and false. Well, Eliza said softly, you're not alone anymore. Something caught in Garrett's chest, something warm and unexpected. No, he said, I suppose I'm not. That night, they sat together on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the mountains. It was the first time they'd done something that felt almost normal, almost like what a married couple might do. Tell me about the ranch, Eliza said, pulling her shawl tighter against the evening chill. How it started. My father bought this land when I was 10, thought he could make something of it. He worked himself into an early grave trying. Garrett leaned back in his chair. When he died, I was 17 and the bank was about to foreclose. I had a choice, give up or fight. So I fought. Borrowed money from a rancher up in Butte who saw something in me. Worked 20-hour days for 5 years to pay him back with interest. Built the herd from 30 head to over 300. Added land when I could afford it. Hired good men like Chuck who actually gave a damn about the work. That's remarkable. You must be proud. Proud, bitter, tired. All of it. He glanced at her. What about you? What did you leave behind in Kentucky besides trouble? She was quiet for a moment. Friends. A few. The churchwomen who taught me to sew and cook. My parents' graves. Her voice softened. I used to visit them every Sunday, put flowers there when I could afford them. I suppose someone else will do it now. Or no one will. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was my choice to leave. She looked at him. Do you ever regret any of your choices, Garrett? The hard ones? Every day. But regretting them won't change them, so I focus on what's in front of me instead of what's behind. That's very practical. That's survival. He stood. It's getting cold. You should go inside. What about you? I'll be in shortly. I want to check the fence line one more time. He didn't check any fence line. He walked down to the creek that ran through his property and stood there in the darkness, listening to the water and trying to understand the strange tightness in his chest. In 1 week, Eliza had gone from a name on paper to a presence in his house, a voice at his table, a person he was starting to care about despite every intention to keep this arrangement purely practical. That was dangerous. Caring meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain when things inevitably fell apart. He'd learned that lesson young and never forgotten it. But as he walked back toward the house and saw the lamp burning in Eliza's window, saw her shadow moving behind the curtain, he couldn't quite convince himself to rebuild the walls he'd spent a lifetime constructing. Maybe, just maybe, they were already coming down. The second week brought snow, heavy and thick, blanketing the valley in white. Garrett spent long hours moving cattle to sheltered pastures, breaking ice on water troughs, making sure the animals had enough feed to survive the cold. Eliza kept the house warm, the meals hot, and didn't complain when he tracked snow and mud across her clean floors. One evening, he came in late to find her at the stove, stirring something that smelled like heaven. "What is that?" he asked, shrugging out of his heavy coat. "Beef stew. Mary gave me the recipe." She glanced over her shoulder. "You look frozen. Sit by the fire and warm up." He did as she suggested, too tired to argue. A few minutes later, she brought him a bowl of stew and a thick slice of bread. "Thank you," he said, and meant it. She sat across from him with her own bowl. "Chuck says the cattle are doing well despite the weather." "They are. We'll lose a few to the cold, but that's expected. As long as the majority survive until spring, we'll be fine." He ate a spoonful of stew and nearly groaned. "This is incredible. It's just stew." "Best stew I've ever had." She smiled, pleased. "Well, there's plenty more. You should eat. You're working too hard." "Winter on a ranch means working too hard. Can't be helped." "Then I'll make sure you're fed properly." She paused. "Garrett, I've been thinking. I want to help more. With the ranch work, I mean. I know I can't do what you and Chuck do, but surely there's something useful I can contribute besides housework. You're already doing plenty. Keeping house isn't enough. I came here to build a life, not just keep one running. She leaned forward, earnest. Teach me. Teach me about the cattle, the land, the work. Let me be part of this, not just a spectator. He studied her, this small woman with determination blazing in her eyes, and made a decision. All right, starting tomorrow, you come out with me. I'll teach you everything I know. But I'm warning you, it's hard work, and it's not glamorous. I don't want glamorous. I want useful. Then useful is what you'll get. The next morning, bundled in layers of wool and leather, Eliza followed Garrett out into the snowy pastures. He taught her to recognize the signs of a sick cow, how to check for frostbite on the calves, how to repair a broken fence post. She worked without complaint, even when her hands went numb and her boots filled with snow. At midday, they stopped to warm themselves by a small fire Garrett built, sharing coffee from a tin cup and jerky from his saddlebag. "You're doing well," he said, watching her warm her hands over the flames. "I'm freezing and exhausted." "That means you're doing it right." He handed her the coffee. "Most people from back east would have quit after an hour. I'm not most people." "No," he agreed. "You're not." She looked at him over the rim of the cup. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Depends on the question." "Why did you really place that advertisement? You said you were lonely, but there's more to it than that, isn't there?" Garrett was silent for a long moment. Then, "My father spent his whole life alone after my mother died giving birth to me. He worked himself to death on this land, and in the end, he had nothing but dirt and debt and a son who barely knew him. I didn't want to end up the same way. Alone, with nothing to show for my life but work and more work. So you wanted a family. I wanted something, someone. I wasn't even sure what until I read your letter." He poked at the fire with a stick. "You said you were steel underneath silk. That's what caught me. Most women would have tried to make themselves sound soft, accommodating. You told the truth. You said you were strong. That's what I needed. Not someone to take care of, but someone who could stand beside me." "And am I standing beside you?" He looked at her then, really looked. At the snow dusting her hair, the pink in her cold, flushed cheeks, the unwavering resolve in her eyes. "Yes," he said, "you are." Something passed between them in that moment, something neither of them was quite ready to name. Then the wind picked up, scattering snow and breaking the spell. "Come on," Garrett said, standing. "Let's get back. Storm's coming." They made it to the house just as the blizzard hit, a wall of white that erased the world beyond the windows. For 3 days they were snowed in together, the ranch work reduced to quick trips to the barn and back. They spent the time reading, talking, playing cards by the fire. Garrett taught Eliza to play poker, and she beat him soundly on her third hand. "You're bluffing," she accused when he raised the bet. "Am I?" "Yes. Your jaw twitches when you bluff." He touched his jaw, surprised. "No, it doesn't." "It absolutely does, right there." She pointed. "Every time." He laid down his cards, a pair of threes, and she crowed with triumph, showing her full house. "You're a hustler, Mrs. Masterson. Just observant." She gathered her winnings, matchsticks, with a grin. "Again?" They played until the fire burned low and exhaustion pulled at them both. As Eliza stood to go to bed, she paused. "Thank you," she said. "For letting you rob me at cards? For these days, for not making me feel like a burden or a stranger in your home. Our home," she corrected. "For treating me like a partner." "That's what you are," Garrett said. "Partners. In this marriage, in this ranch, in all of it." She smiled, soft and genuine, and something in his chest shifted again, settling into a new configuration he didn't quite recognize but didn't entirely mind. "Good night, Garrett." "Good night, Eliza." He watched her disappear into her room, listened to the soft sounds of her preparing for bed, and wondered when exactly this arrangement had started to feel like something more. When the storm cleared, the town was buried under 3 feet of snow. Garrett and Chuck spent 2 days digging out, checking on the cattle, assessing damage. They lost 4 head to the cold, fewer than expected. The rest were bedded down in the sheltered pastures, weathering the winter as best they could. On the third day after the storm, Garrett needed supplies from town. Eliza insisted on coming with him. "You don't need to," he said. "I can handle it." "I know you can, but I'm not hiding from them, Garrett. If I never go to town again, they win, and I won't give them that satisfaction." So they went together, the wagon cutting through snow-packed roads, the cold sharp enough to freeze breath in the air. When they reached Caldwell Flats, the town was busy with people digging out, hauling supplies, checking on neighbors. Garrett helped Eliza down from the wagon and walked with her into Harper's Mercantile. The store fell silent when they entered. Mrs. Harper looked up from behind the counter, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Masterson, Mrs. Masterson." She nodded to each of them. "What can I do for you?" Garrett handed over his list. "Need these supplies, and we're in no hurry, so take your time." As Mrs. Harper gathered items, two other women came into the store, Mrs. Donnelly and a pinch-faced woman Garrett didn't recognize. They saw Eliza and immediately began whispering, not even bothering to be subtle about it. "Awfully convenient. Barely knows the man. Wonder what she's really after." Garrett felt Eliza stiffen beside him, but she kept her eyes forward, her expression calm. He was about to say something when someone else beat him to it. "Excuse me, ladies." Mary Dawson stepped forward, her round face set in unusually stern lines. "But if you have something to say about Mrs. Masterson, perhaps you should say it to her face instead of whispering like schoolgirls." Mrs. Donnelly flushed. "We weren't." "Oh, you absolutely were. I heard you clear as day." Mary moved to stand beside Eliza. "Now, I don't know what kind of Christian charity you think you're practicing, but where I come from, we welcome newcomers instead of tearing them down. Eliza Masterson is a good woman who's working hard to build a life here. The least you can do is show her basic human decency." "Well," Mrs. Donnelly drew herself up, "I hardly think—" "That's your problem right there. You hardly think at all. You just gossip." Mary crossed her arms. "Now why don't you finish your business and let these good people finish theirs in peace?" The two women left in a huff, the door slamming behind them. Mary turned to Eliza with a warm smile. "Don't let them get to you, dear. They're just bored and mean. Bad combination." "Thank you, Mary," Eliza said softly. "You didn't have to do that." "Of course I did. We women have to stick together, especially when the men are too polite to say what needs saying." She shot a look at Garrett. "No offense." "None taken," Garrett said. "I was about 2 seconds from saying something much less polite." Mrs. Harper finished gathering the supplies, her expression thoughtful. "Mrs. Masterson," she said as she tallied the bill, "I want to apologize for my behavior when your husband first came in here talking about bringing a wife from back east. I made assumptions I had no right to make." Eliza met her eyes. "I appreciate that, Mrs. Harper. And I want you to know, if you ever need anything or just want someone to talk to, my door's open. A woman alone on a ranch can get awfully isolated, especially in winter." "Thank you. That means more than you know." On the ride home, Eliza was quiet, staring out at the snow-covered landscape. Finally, she spoke. "Mary was fierce. I've never had anyone defend me like that before." "She's a good woman. Chuck's lucky to have her." "Are you? Lucky to have me, I mean." The question came out tentative, uncertain. Garrett glanced at her, saw the vulnerability in her face, and realized she genuinely didn't know the answer. Didn't know that in just 2 weeks she'd become essential. That he looked forward to seeing her at breakfast, to hearing her voice in the evening, to knowing she was there, a warm presence in a house that had been cold for too long. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." Her smile, when it came, was like sunrise breaking through clouds. That night, Garrett sat at his desk writing in the ledger, recording the cattle losses and supply costs, when he heard a knock on his door. "Come in." Eliza entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might want this." "Thank you." He took the cup, gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Can't sleep?" "Too much on my mind." She sat, cradling her own cup. "Garrett, can I ask you something?" "Always." "What happened between you and Preacher Dunbar? There's clearly history there beyond just you not going to church." Garrett leaned back, considering how much to say. Then he decided she deserved the full story. 5 years ago, Dunbar tried to buy this land from me, offered half what it was worth, said I should take it because I was young and foolish and would just lose it anyway. I refused. He didn't take it well. Garrett sipped his coffee. Then 2 years ago, there was a drought, lost half my herd. Dunbar came around again, same offer, same condescending smile. Said it was a sign I should give up ranching and find work in town. I told him where he could stick his offer. He sounds like a peach. He's a vulture, preys on people when they're weak, calls it helping. Garrett's jaw tightened. Last year, he got the town council to raise my property taxes, claiming I was using more than my fair share of water rights. It was a lie, but I paid the increase anyway rather than fight it in court. That's the kind of man he is. And you think he's still trying to force you out? I know he is. He wants this land for his sons, wants to be the biggest landowner in the valley, and he'll use any method to get it, including turning the town against me. He met her eyes. Against us now. Eliza was quiet for a moment. Then we'll just have to prove him wrong. Show the town that we're not going anywhere. It won't be easy. I didn't come here for easy. She stood, took his empty cup. I came here to build something worth keeping, and that's exactly what we're going to do. After she left, Garrett sat in the silence, feeling something like hope stirring in his chest. He'd been alone so long, fighting every battle by himself, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone in his corner. Someone who looked at his enemies and said, "We, not you." He was still thinking about it when he finally climbed into bed, listening to the house settle around him, to the small sounds of Eliza moving in her room below. And for the first time in years, Garrett Masterson fell asleep, not dreading the next day, but actually looking forward to it. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in mid-December, 3 weeks after the wedding. Garrett was in the north pasture with Chuck, checking fence lines damaged by the snow, when he saw the dust cloud rising from the direction of the ranch house. A rider, moving fast. Chuck saw it too and swore under his breath. "That's Billy Watts," he said, squinting at the approaching figure. "Kid only rides that hard when something's wrong." They met Billy halfway, the boy's horse lathered and blowing hard. The kid's face was flushed with excitement and something that looked like fear. "Mr. Masterson," he gasped out, "you need to come quick. Your cattle, the ones in the south pasture, they're gone." Garrett felt ice settle in his stomach. Gone how? Stolen. Gates were open, tracks leading east toward the mountains. My pa saw it this morning when he was checking his own herd. Sent me to tell you right away. How many head? Looked like maybe 40, 50. Hard to tell with the snow. 40 or 50 head. That was nearly 15% of his winter stock, worth thousands of dollars he couldn't afford to lose. Garrett wheeled his horse around without a word, Chuck and Billy following close behind. The south pasture told the story clearly enough. The gate hung open, the lock broken clean through. Deep tracks in the snow showed where the cattle had been driven out, heading east into the rough country toward the mountains. Multiple riders, at least 4 from the hoofprints. They'd worked fast and efficient, knew what they were doing. "Professionals," Chuck said, kneeling to examine the tracks. "This wasn't some drunk cowboys looking for beef. This was planned." "How long ago?" Garrett asked, his voice deadly calm. 6, maybe 8 hours. They moved at night, waited for the moon to set. Chuck stood, brushing snow from his knees. "Trail's clear enough to follow, but they've got a hell of a head start. By now they could be halfway to the territorial line." "Then we better ride hard." Garrett turned to Billy. "Go back to town. Tell the sheriff what happened. Tell him we're tracking east." "Yes, sir." Billy hesitated. "Mr. Masterson? Folks are saying, I don't care what folks are saying. Just deliver the message." After the boy rode off, Chuck looked at his boss with concern. "What do you want to do about Eliza?" "She's going to hear about this." "I'll stop at the house. Let her know what's happening." Garrett was already moving toward his horse. "Get the men together. Anyone who can ride and shoot. We leave in an hour." At the house, Eliza was kneading bread dough when Garrett came through the door, his face set in grim lines that made her hands still. "What's wrong?" "Cattle theft. South pasture, maybe 50 head." He was already pulling his rifle down from the rack, checking ammunition. "I'm riding out with Chuck and the men to track them." "How long will you be gone?" "As long as it takes. Could be a day. Could be a week. He paused, met her eyes. Lock the doors. Keep the rifle close. If anyone comes around you don't know, don't open up. You think whoever did this might come here? I don't know what to think, but I'm not taking chances with your safety. He moved to her, put his hands on her shoulders. Eliza, listen to me. Things are about to get ugly in this town. People are going to talk, make accusations. Some might even try to use this against us. Against us, we're the victims. Doesn't matter. Not everyone sees it that way. His jaw tightened. Just promise me you'll be careful. Don't go to town alone. Don't trust anyone except Chuck's family. And if you see Preacher Dunbar sniffing around, you tell him nothing. You think he's involved? I think he's the kind of man who'd use a crisis to his advantage, whether he caused it or not. Garrett released her, turned back to gathering supplies. I have to go. The longer we wait, the colder the trail gets. Eliza followed him to the door. Garrett. When he turned, she reached up and touched his face, a gesture so unexpected it froze him in place. Come back safe. Please. Something softened in his expression, just for a moment. I will. I promise. She watched from the porch as he rode out with Chuck and 3 other ranch hands, all armed, all grim-faced. The December wind cut through her shawl, but she stayed there until they disappeared over the ridge, heading east into country she'd never seen. Then she went inside, locked the doors like he'd told her, and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. The trail led them into the Badlands, a maze of rocky canyons and frozen creek beds, where the wind howled like something dying. They rode hard through the afternoon, following tracks that were still clear in the snow. Whoever had stolen the cattle knew this country, knew the shortcuts and hiding places. But they were driving a herd, which slowed them down. By nightfall, Garrett and his men had closed the gap to maybe 3 hours. They made camp in a sheltered canyon, ate cold rations, and didn't light a fire. Garrett sat with his back against a rock, rifle across his knees, and thought about Eliza alone in that house. Boss. Chuck settled down beside him. You think this was random? Wrong place, wrong time? No. Garrett's voice was flat. This was targeted. They knew which pasture, knew when we'd be checking the north fence. Someone's been watching us. Any ideas who? I've got suspicions, but suspicions won't hold up in court. He glanced at his foreman. How long have we known each other, Chuck? Going on 12 years now. Why? In all that time, have I ever backed down from a fight? Not once. Then you know I'm not about to start now. Garrett's eyes were hard in the starlight. Whoever did this thinks they can break me, run me off my land or bankrupt me trying to replace the stock. But they made a mistake. What's that? They gave me something to fight for besides just pride. He thought of Eliza's hand on his face, the worry in her eyes. I've got a wife now, a home that means something, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take that away. Chuck smiled, just a little. She's changed you, boss. In a good way. Maybe. Garrett settled his hat lower. Get some sleep. We ride at first light. They found the cattle the next afternoon, penned in a natural corral formed by canyon walls and a makeshift fence. The thieves had left one man to guard them, a nervous kid who couldn't have been more than 20. When he saw 6 armed men riding toward him, he threw down his rifle and put his hands up so fast he nearly fell over. Don't shoot, he stammered. I didn't want no part of this. They made me stay. Who's they? Garrett dismounted, his hand on his pistol. I don't know names. 4 men came through town last week, offered me $20 to help move some cattle, said it was legal, said they'd bought them. The kid was sweating despite the cold. I swear I didn't know they were stolen until we got out here. You're lying. I'm not. I swear on my mother's grave. Garrett grabbed the front of the kid's coat, hauled him close. You're going to tell me everything, who hired you, where they went, what the plan was. And if I think you're lying even once, I'm leaving you out here to freeze. Understand? The kid nodded frantically, words spilling out. 3 men, strangers to Caldwell Flats. They'd been asking around about ranches, about who had the best stock, who was having financial troubles. They'd offered good money for help. The kid had needed it. His family was struggling. They were supposed to drive the cattle to a buyer across the territorial line, split the profit. Where are they now? Garrett asked. Rode out this morning. Said they'd be back tomorrow to move the herd. I was supposed to keep watch until then. Garrett released him with disgust. Chuck, tie him up. He's coming back with us to face the sheriff. Please, Mr. Masterson, I got a family. Should have thought of that before you helped steal my cattle. Garrett turned his back on the kid's pleas. Let's get this herd moving. I want to be back at the ranch before dark tomorrow. They drove the cattle through the night, taking turns sleeping in the saddle, pushing hard to get home. Garrett's mind was racing the whole time, putting pieces together. Strangers asking questions about ranches, targeted theft of his best stock. The timing, right after he'd married Eliza, right when the town was already talking. This wasn't random. This was meant to hurt him specifically, and he had a growing certainty about who was behind it. Back in Caldwell Flats, Eliza was fighting her own battle. She'd lasted one day alone before Mary Dawson showed up with a basket of food and a determined expression. "I'm not leaving you out here by yourself while the men are gone," Mary announced, sweeping into the house. "Chuck would skin me alive if something happened to you on my watch." "I'm perfectly safe," Eliza protested, though truthfully she was grateful for the company. "Safe and lonely are two different things." Mary started unpacking her basket. "Now, I brought some of my bread and preserves, and I thought we could do some baking. Nothing takes your mind off worry like kneading dough." They spent the afternoon in the kitchen, making pies and bread, while Mary filled the silence with stories about the town, about her early days with Chuck, about what it was like being married to a rancher. "First year nearly killed me," Mary said, rolling out pie crust. "I was a town girl, didn't know the first thing about ranch life, burned more meals than I served, couldn't tell a sick cow from a healthy one, cried myself to sleep more nights than I can count." "What changed?" Eliza asked. "I stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be useful. Stopped worrying about what I didn't know and started learning. And Chuck, he was patient with me. Never made me feel stupid for asking questions." She glanced at Eliza. "Garrett's a good man, underneath all that granite. He'll take care of you." "I know, I just wish—" Eliza stopped, unsure how to finish. "Wish what, honey?" "I wish I knew if this was ever going to be more than just an arrangement, if he's ever going to see me as more than a solution to his loneliness." Mary set down her rolling pin. "Can I tell you something? When Chuck first asked me to marry him, I said yes because he was kind and steady, and I thought that was enough. I didn't love him yet, but I learned to love him, day by day, through all the small moments, the way he'd bring me wildflowers for no reason, the way he'd rub my feet when I was tired, the way he'd look at me like I was the only person in the world who mattered." "Garrett doesn't look at me like that." "Doesn't he?" Mary smiled knowingly. "I've seen the way he watches you when you're not looking, the way he softens when you walk into a room. That man is halfway to loving you already. He just doesn't know it yet." Eliza wanted to believe that, but before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Both women froze. "Expecting anyone?" Mary whispered. "No." Eliza grabbed the rifle Garrett had left for her, checked it was loaded. "Stay behind me." She moved to the door, called out, "Who is it?" "Preacher Dunbar, Mrs. Masterson. I'd like to speak with you." Eliza exchanged a look with Mary, remembering Garrett's warning, but she couldn't just refuse to open the door to a preacher. She cracked it open, keeping the rifle visible. "Preacher, what can I do for you?" Dunbar was a tall man with iron-gray hair and eyes that were supposed to look kind, but mostly looked calculating. He smiled when he saw the rifle. "No need for weapons, Mrs. Masterson. I came to check on you. Make sure you're all right with your husband gone chasing thieves." "I'm fine, thank you. May I come in? It's rather cold out here." Eliza didn't move. "I'm not in the habit of entertaining men when my husband isn't home." His smile tightened. "I'm a man of faith, not a threat." "Even so. If you have something to say, you can say it from there." Dunbar's facade of friendliness cracked just slightly. "Very well. I wanted to talk to you about your husband's situation. This cattle theft is a serious matter, serious enough that some in town are beginning to question whether it was a theft at all." "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm simply telling you what people are saying, that perhaps Mr. Masterson arranged this theft himself to collect insurance money or gain sympathy." He paused. "Or perhaps to distract from other financial troubles." Eliza felt rage building in her chest, hot and sharp. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. My husband lost 50 head of cattle. Why would he do that to himself?" "Desperate men do desperate things. and your husband's financial situation may not be as stable as he's led you to believe. Get off my property. Eliza's voice was ice. Right now. Mrs. Masterson, I'm only trying to help. Help. She stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. You come to my home while my husband is gone, spread vicious lies and call it helping? You're a vulture, Preacher Dunbar, and I want you gone before I forget my manners entirely. For a moment, genuine anger flashed across Dunbar's face. You're making a mistake, aligning yourself with Garrett Masterson. He's a proud, stubborn man who makes enemies faster than friends. Those enemies will become yours too. Then I'll face them the same way I'm facing you, with my eyes open and my spine straight. She cocked the rifle. Now get. Dunbar left, but not before giving her a look that promised this wasn't over. After he was gone, Eliza's hand started shaking so hard she had to sit down. Mary appeared beside her with a cup of tea. Well done, honey, though you just made yourself an enemy. I already had one. Now he just knows it. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Mary asked the question Eliza had been dreading. Do you think there's any truth to what Dunbar said about Garrett's finances? No. Eliza was firm. Garrett's been honest with me about everything else. If he was in financial trouble, he would have told me. You're probably right, but people in town are going to talk anyway. They'll use this theft to tear him down, and you by extension. Let them try. Eliza stared into the fire. I didn't come all this way to be broken by gossip and lies. Garrett and I are building something here, something real, and no preacher or small-minded busybody is going to take that away from us. Mary squeezed her hand. You're stronger than you look, Eliza Masterson. Garrett's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, Eliza said quietly. For the first time in my life, I have a home that's mine, a husband who treats me with respect, a future that isn't defined by fear. I'll fight for that with everything I have. Garrett and the men rode back into Caldwell Flats at noon the next day, the stolen cattle moving ahead of them, the young thief bound and riding between Chuck and one of the ranch hands. Word spread fast, and by the time they reached the sheriff's office, half the town had gathered to watch. Sheriff Tom Brennan came out, a weathered man in his 50s with a reputation for fairness that Garrett hoped was deserved. Masterson, heard you had some trouble. Found my cattle in the Badlands. This one was guarding them. Garrett gestured to the bound kid. Says 3 men hired him to help with the theft. Strangers to town, asking questions about ranches. Brennan pulled the kid down from his horse, started asking questions. The story came tumbling out again, same as before. 3 men, good money, didn't know it was theft until it was too late. Brennan listened, his face giving nothing away. You got names for these men? No, sir. They never told me. Descriptions? One was tall, had a scar on his face. One was short and stocky. Third one did most of the talking, wore a fancy coat. Brennan looked at Garrett. Mean anything to you? No, but I'd like to know who hired them. That makes 2 of us. The sheriff turned to his deputy. Lock this one up. Cattle theft is a hanging offense, but we'll let the judge decide. He looked at the crowd that had gathered. Anyone else have information about these strangers? You come see me. Until then, this matter is under investigation. As people began to disperse, Garrett heard the whispers start. Convenient he found them so fast. How do we know he didn't arrange the whole thing? Insurance money's a powerful motivator. He ignored them, focused on getting his cattle back to the ranch. But as he turned to mount up, Preacher Dunbar stepped forward from the crowd. Mr. Masterson, might I have a word? Make it quick. I visited your wife yesterday. Wanted to make sure she was all right while you were gone. Garrett went very still. Did you? I did. She seems quite devoted to you, defended your honor most vigorously. Dunbar's smile didn't reach his eyes. I hope you appreciate the loyalty of a good woman, Masterson. Such loyalty is rare and precious. Stay away from my wife. I was simply being neighborly. You were being a snake. Garrett stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet that only Dunbar could hear. You went to my home while I was gone, tried to intimidate my wife with your insinuations and lies. That was a mistake. The last mistake I'll let you make where she's concerned. Are you threatening me? I'm making a promise. Touch my wife. Speak to my wife. Even look at my wife wrong. and I will end you. I don't care if you wear a collar or how many people show up to your church. You come near her again, we're going to have a reckoning." Dunbar's face flushed with anger. "You're making powerful enemies, Masterson." "I've had powerful enemies my whole life. One more won't make a difference." Garrett turned his back, a deliberate insult. "Chuck, let's move out." They drove the cattle home, Garrett's mind racing with everything Dunbar had said, everything he'd implied. The preacher had crossed a line, and that meant the gloves were coming off. This wasn't just about land or pride anymore. This was about protecting what was his, protecting Eliza. When they reached the ranch, she was standing on the porch, Mary beside her. The moment Garrett dismounted, Eliza ran to him, and without thinking, he caught her in his arms. "You're all right," she said, her hands on his chest, his arms checking for injuries. "I was so worried." "I'm fine. Got the cattle back, got the thief." He pulled back to look at her. "Mary told me Dunbar came by. What did he say to you?" "Nothing I couldn't handle. I sent him packing with a rifle and some choice words." Despite everything, Garrett almost smiled. "Did you now?" "I did, and if he comes back, I'll do worse." She met his eyes, fierce and unafraid. "I meant what I said, Garrett. No one's going to tear us down. Not Dunbar, not the town, not anyone." He cupped her face in his hands, something shifting in his chest, something that felt dangerously close to the thing he'd been avoiding for weeks now. "You're remarkable. You know that? I'm just doing what any wife would do. Protecting her home and her husband." "Not any wife, you." He kissed her forehead, let his lips linger there. "Thank you. For being here. For being strong." "Always," she whispered. Chuck cleared his throat behind them. "Hate to interrupt, boss, but we should get these cattle secured before dark." Garrett released Eliza reluctantly, turned back to the work. But as he moved the cattle to their pasture, as he checked each animal for injury, as he settled back into the rhythm of ranch life, he couldn't stop thinking about the way Eliza had felt in his arms, the way it had felt like home. That night, after dinner, Garrett found Eliza on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. "Can't sleep?" he asked, settling beside her. "Too much to think about." She glanced at him. "Are we going to be all right? With the theft? With Dunbar? With all of it?" "Yes." He said it with absolute certainty. "Because we're not giving them any other option. This is our land, our life, our choice, and we're going to fight for it. Together? Together." He reached for her hand, threaded his fingers through hers. "Eliza, I need you to know something. When I asked you to come here, I thought it was just an arrangement, a practical solution to loneliness, but it's become more than that." "Has it?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You've become more than that. To me." He struggled with the words, unused to voicing emotions he'd kept buried for years. "I don't know what to call this yet, but it's real. And it matters. You matter." She turned to look at him, and in the starlight, her eyes were shining. "You matter to me too, more than I expected, more than I knew how to prepare for." They sat there in the cold December night, hands linked, something unspoken passing between them. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it, the promise of it. And for the first time since he'd placed that advertisement in the Matrimonial Times, Garrett Masterson allowed himself to hope for something more than survival. He allowed himself to hope for happiness. But hope, Garrett learned over the next 2 weeks, was a fragile thing in a town determined to crush it. The whispers that had started as speculation hardened into accusations. In Harper's Mercantile, in the saloon, on the church steps after Sunday services, the story took on a life of its own. Garrett Masterson had staged the theft himself. He was in debt. He was desperate. The marriage to the mail-order bride was just another con, another scheme to appear legitimate while he ran his ranch into the ground. None of it was true. But truth had never mattered much in Caldwell Flats when a good story was available. Sheriff Brennan had questioned the 3 strangers the young thief described, but they'd vanished like smoke. No one in town admitted to seeing them, though Garrett knew damn well someone had to have noticed 3 out-of-towners asking pointed questions about his ranch. People were protecting someone, and he had a cold certainty about who. The proof came on a bitter morning in late December when Chuck rode up to the house, his face grim. "Boss, we got a problem. Big one." Garrett was already reaching for his coat. Show me. They rode to the eastern fence line, where 4 of Garrett's best breeding bulls lay dead in the snow, their throats cut clean, not killed for meat, not killed by wolves or cats. Murdered. When? Garrett asked, his voice deadly calm even as rage burned through his veins. Sometime last night. I did the evening check and they were fine. Found them this morning. Chuck dismounted, knelt by the nearest carcass. This wasn't random, boss. Someone knew which animals were most valuable. 4 bulls. Garrett did the math in his head, felt sick. That's $8,000 of breeding stock. Gone. More than gone. It's a message. Chuck looked up at him. Someone's trying to break you. Garrett stared at the dead animals, at the waste and cruelty, and something inside him went cold and hard. He'd been patient. He'd tried to keep his head down, protect Eliza from the worst of the town's ugliness. But patience had gotten him nowhere except deeper into a hole someone else was digging. Get the men, he said quietly, all of them, and tell them to come armed. Garrett, this ends today, one way or another. An hour later, 8 men sat their horses in front of the ranch house, all carrying rifles. Eliza came out onto the porch, saw the guns, the grim faces, and her expression hardened with understanding. You're going after them. I'm going to get answers. Garrett swung down from his horse, climbed the porch steps. And I'm not asking nicely anymore. Who do you think did this? I know who did this. I just need to prove it. He took her hands. Stay here. Lock the doors. If I'm not back by nightfall, don't. She gripped his hands tighter. Don't say it like you're not coming back. I'm coming back. I promise you that. But Eliza, if something does happen, if this goes wrong, the ranch papers are in my desk, top drawer. Chuck knows how to run things. You'll be taken care of. I don't want to be taken care of. I want my husband to come home. Her voice broke slightly. Please, Garrett, don't do anything foolish. He pulled her close, held her against his chest, breathed in the scent of her hair. I'm doing what needs to be done. What should have been done a long time ago. She pulled back, looked up at him with those fierce golden brown eyes. Then do it and come home, because I'll be waiting, and if you don't come back, I swear I'll ride into town myself and finish whatever you started. Despite everything, he smiled. You would too, wouldn't you? Without hesitation, she reached up, touched his face with cold fingers. Be careful, please. He kissed her then, really kissed her for the first time since their wedding day. Not a polite peck, not a gesture for show, but a real kiss that told her everything he hadn't yet found words for. When he pulled back, her eyes were wide with surprise and something that looked like hope. I'll be back, he said. I promise. Then he was back on his horse, leading his men toward town, toward whatever confrontation waited there. Behind him, Eliza stood on the porch, one hand pressed to her lips, watching until they disappeared from sight. Caldwell Flats fell silent when Garrett Masterson rode down Main Street with 8 armed men at his back. People stopped what they were doing, ducked into doorways, watched from windows. This was the kind of thing that ended in gunfire and bloodshed, and no one wanted to be caught in the crossfire. Garrett pulled up in front of the church, dismounted, and walked straight to the door. It was locked. He pounded on it with his fist, the sound echoing like thunder. Dunbar, I know you're in there. Come out. Nothing. Garrett stepped back, nodded to Chuck. His foreman put his shoulder to the door, and it gave way with a crash of splintering wood. Inside, the church was empty except for Preacher Dunbar, standing at the altar with his hands clasped, looking serene and unafraid. Mr. Masterson, breaking into a house of worship, have you no shame? Don't talk to me about shame. Garrett walked down the aisle, his boots loud on the wooden floor. 4 of my bulls were slaughtered last night, murdered in their pasture. How terrible, you have my sympathies. I don't want your sympathies, I want the truth. Garrett stopped at the front pew. You hired those men, the ones who stole my cattle. You've been behind all of it. Dunbar's expression didn't change. That's quite an accusation. Do you have proof? Not yet, but I will. Then until you do, I suggest you leave. You're disturbing the peace. The peace? Garrett laughed, harsh and bitter. You've been trying to destroy me for 5 years, tried to buy my land for nothing, raised my taxes, turned the town against me. And when none of that worked, you resorted to theft and murder. You're unhinged, Masterson, paranoid and desperate. Am I? Garrett leaned forward. Here's what I think happened. You hired those men to steal my cattle, figured I'd be so desperate to get them back I wouldn't ask too many questions. When that didn't break me, you escalated, killed my breeding stock, tried to bankrupt me so I'd have to sell. This is fantasy. Is it? Because I'm betting if the sheriff searches your property, your accounts, he'll find connections to those three strangers. Money changing hands, letters, something. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Dunbar's face. Sheriff Brennan would need a warrant for that, and he won't get one based on your wild theories. Maybe not, but I don't need a warrant. Garrett straightened. I'm giving you a choice, preacher. You can confess right now, face legal consequences, and we end this cleanly. Or you can keep lying, and I'll tear this town apart finding the proof myself. I'll dig into every corner of your life until I find what I'm looking for. You're threatening me. I'm promising you. You came after what's mine, my land, my stock, my wife's peace of mind. That was a mistake. Because I'm done being patient. I'm done being the bigger man. Garrett's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. You want a war, Dunbar? You've got one. But wars have casualties, and I promise you, you're going to lose more than you're willing to sacrifice. Dunbar's composure cracked. You think you're so righteous? You think this town will side with you over me? I've been here 30 years. You're just a stubborn rancher with a questionable wife and a failing operation. Garrett moved so fast, Dunbar didn't have time to react. One moment he was standing at the pew, the next he had the preacher by his collar, lifted partially off his feet. Caller questionable again, Garrett said softly. Please, give me a reason. Garrett, Chuck's voice from the doorway, calm but warning. Not worth it. For a long moment, Garrett held Dunbar there, watching fear bloom in the man's eyes. Then he released him with disgust. You're right, he's not worth it. He turned toward the door, then paused. But preacher, this isn't over, not even close. You made this personal when you went after my wife. Now it's personal for me too. Sleep well knowing that. Outside, Sheriff Brennan was waiting with two deputies looking unhappy. Masterson, heard you broke into the church. Door was unlocked. That's not what I heard. Brennan sighed. Look, I understand you're upset about your bulls, but you can't go around threatening people. I didn't threaten anyone. I stated facts. You really think Dunbar's behind the theft? I know he is. And if you did your job properly, you'd know it too. Brennan's face hardened. That's enough. I've been investigating. Have you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been doing a whole lot of nothing while my ranch gets picked apart. I need evidence, not hunches. And unless you have something concrete, there's nothing I can do. The sheriff stepped closer, lowered his voice. Between you and me? I think you might be right about Dunbar, but I can't move against him without proof. He's got too many friends, too much influence. You understand? I understand you're more worried about politics than justice. I'm worried about keeping the peace, which you're not helping with by storming churches with armed men. Then do your job and I won't have to do it for you. Garrett mounted his horse. Come on, boys. We're done here. They rode out of town under 100 watching eyes, and Garrett knew he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He'd challenged Dunbar publicly, made an enemy of the most powerful man in Caldwell Flats. There would be consequences. But as he rode toward home, toward Eliza waiting on the porch, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Some things were worth fighting for, worth burning bridges and making enemies and facing whatever came next. She was one of them. Eliza saw them coming and felt relief flood through her so strongly her knees nearly buckled. No gunshots, no one wounded or dead. Garrett was safe. He dismounted and came to her in 3 long strides, pulled her into his arms without a word. She held him tight, feeling the tension in his body, the barely controlled rage still simmering beneath the surface. What happened? She asked against his chest. Nothing good. I confronted Dunbar, made some threats I probably shouldn't have. Sheriff says his hands are tied without proof. He pulled back to look at her. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Dunbar's going to retaliate. Let him try. Eliza's voice was steel. We'll face it together. You should be scared. I am scared, but I'm also angry, and angry beats scared every time. She took his hand, led him into the house where it was warm. Come on, you need food and rest. Then we'll figure out what to do next. Over dinner, Garrett told her everything. The dead bulls, the confrontation, the sheriff's warning. Eliza listened without interrupting, her face growing more determined with each word. We need proof, she said when he finished. Something concrete that ties Dunbar to the theft. I've been trying to find it for weeks. There's nothing. Then we're not looking in the right places. She stood, began pacing. Those 3 men who stole the cattle, they had to stay somewhere, eat somewhere. Someone in town must have seen them, talked to them. People don't just appear and disappear like ghosts. They do when the town protects them. Not everyone in town is loyal to Dunbar. There have to be people who'd talk if they thought it was safe. She stopped pacing, turned to him. What about that young man you caught, the one guarding the cattle? Did he say anything else? Anything at all that might help? Garrett thought back to the kid's terrified confession. He said they offered him $20. That's good money for a week's work, more than most ranch hands make in a month. So they had money to throw around. That means they had a backer, someone funding the operation. Dunbar has money, but so do a dozen other men in this valley. But how many of them have a grudge against you specifically? How many have been trying to buy your land? She sat back down, leaned forward. Garrett, we need to go through your finances, your paperwork, find out who benefits most if you fail. Besides Dunbar, you mean? Maybe it's not just Dunbar. Maybe he has partners, business associates who want your land for development or logging or railroad access. She grabbed his hand. There's an answer here. We just have to dig for it. Looking at her, at the fierce intelligence in her eyes, the determination in every line of her body, Garrett felt something shift in his chest. This woman who'd come to him as a stranger, who'd married him out of necessity, was now fighting for him with everything she had. When did you get so smart? He asked softly. I've always been smart. You're just now noticing. She smiled, just a little. Now show me your books. Let's find out who's trying to destroy us. They worked late into the night, spreading papers across the dining table, going through 5 years of ranch records, property assessments, tax documents. Eliza had a head for numbers Garrett hadn't expected, catching patterns he'd missed, asking questions that made him reconsider things he'd taken for granted. Around midnight, she found something. Garrett, look at this. Your property taxes 3 years ago. They jumped by 40%. You said Dunbar pushed that through the town council. Right. Claimed I was using more water than my share. But look at who else's taxes went up that same year. The Fletcher Ranch, the Morrison Place, Old Man Hendrick's spread, every ranch on the eastern side of the valley. Garrett leaned over her shoulder, studying the documents. I never noticed that. I was so focused on my own situation. And look what happened the next year. Fletcher sold to Dunbar's eldest son. Morrison sold 6 months later. Hendricks held out until last spring, then sold to a development company. She looked up at him. What if the tax increase was designed to force sales? Drive out the independent ranchers so someone could consolidate the land? Who owns the development company? I don't know, but I'm betting if we dig deep enough, we'll find Dunbar or someone close to him attached to it. Garrett stared at the documents, pieces clicking into place. It's not just about my land. It's about all the land on the East Valley. He's been working this for years. And you're the last holdout, the stubborn one who won't sell no matter what. Eliza gathered the papers. This is the motive. This is why he's escalating, because time is running out for whatever he's planning. We still don't have proof he hired those thieves. No, but we have a pattern, and patterns mean something. She stood, started organizing the documents into stacks. Tomorrow I'm going to ride into town and do some digging. Talk to Mrs. Harper, Mary, anyone who might have information about that development company. It's not safe. I'll take Chuck with me. But Garrett, we need to know who we're really fighting. And I can ask questions you can't. People will talk to me because I'm new, because I'm a woman, because they think I'm harmless. You're many things. Harmless isn't one of them. She smiled, fierce and proud. Exactly. The next morning, Eliza rode into Caldwell Flats with Chuck beside her, both of them bundled against the December cold. The town was busy with people preparing for Christmas, stringing garlands, setting up for the church bazaar. It would have been cheerful if Eliza could have forgotten why she was really there. She started at Harper's Mercantile, where Mrs. Harper greeted her with cautious warmth. "Mrs. Masterson, what can I help you with?" "Just some supplies, and perhaps some conversation, if you have time." Eliza set her list on the counter, lowered her voice. "Mrs. Harper, you've lived here a long time. You must know about the land sales on the East Valley. Fletcher, Morrison, Hendricks." Mrs. Harper's expression shuddered. "Not sure what you're asking." "I'm asking who bought that land, and why." "That's not really my business." "It becomes your business when my husband's ranch is being targeted by the same people." Eliza leaned forward. "Please, I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want to understand what we're up against." Mrs. Harper glanced around the store, made sure they were alone. "There's a company, Mountain Valley Development. They've been buying up land for the past 3 years. Say they're planning a railroad spur, maybe a new town site." "Who owns it?" "That's the thing. Nobody quite knows. It's all lawyers and shell companies. But the money comes through Dunbar's bank. His son-in-law handles the transactions." Eliza felt cold settle in her stomach. "So Dunbar is involved?" "Can't prove it, but yes, most people think so." Mrs. Harper started gathering supplies. "Mrs. Masterson, you should be careful. Men with that kind of money and power don't like being questioned." "I'm not questioning, I'm fighting back." Eliza paid for her supplies. "Thank you for your honesty." "I didn't say anything," Mrs. Harper said quietly. "But I hope you and your husband are careful. Some of us remember what happened to Fletcher when he tried to make trouble about his tax assessment." "What happened?" "His barn burned down, lost half his stock. After that, he sold and left town." She met Eliza's eyes. "I'm just saying, be careful." Eliza left the store with her mind racing. She made 2 more stops talking to women she'd met at church, casual conversations that yielded small pieces of information. By noon, she had enough to paint a picture, and it was uglier than she'd imagined. Dunbar and his associates were systematically buying up the valley, using tax manipulation, intimidation, and outright sabotage to force sales. The railroad spur was real. She confirmed that much, but it wouldn't be finished for 2 more years. Whoever controlled the land when it came through would make a fortune. Garrett's ranch sat directly in the path of the proposed route. She was heading back to meet Chuck when she ran into Preacher Dunbar himself, coming out of the bank. He stopped when he saw her, his expression cold. "Mrs. Masterson, out shopping?" "Among other things." She didn't slow down, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her nervous. "I heard your husband made quite a scene yesterday, breaking into the church, making wild accusations." "My husband was defending what's his, something you'd understand if you had any honor." Dunbar's face darkened. "You should be careful, young woman. This town can be unforgiving to those who don't know their place." "And what's my place, preacher? Quiet and submissive while you destroy my family?" Eliza stepped closer, dropping her voice. "I know about Mountain Valley Development. I know about the land grabs, the tax scheme, all of it, and I know you're behind it." "You know nothing. You're a scared little girl playing at being a rancher's wife. I'm a woman protecting her home, and unlike you, I'm not afraid to fight in the open instead of hiding behind hired thieves and shady business deals." She smiled, cold and sharp. "But here's what you should know, preacher. You've underestimated both me and my husband. We're not selling, we're not leaving, and we're going to expose every dirty deal you've made." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. Same one my husband made you." She turned to walk away, then paused. "Oh, and preacher, when this is all over and you're facing justice for what you've done, remember this moment. Remember that a scared little girl brought you down." She walked away before he could respond, her heart pounding but her steps steady. Chuck was waiting with the wagon, his expression concerned. "You all right? You look like you just wrestled a bear." "Worse, I wrestled a preacher." She climbed onto the wagon. "Let's go home. I have a lot to tell Garrett." That evening, Garrett listened to everything Eliza had learned, his expression growing darker with each word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "A railroad spur," he finally said. "That explains the urgency. They need to control the route before construction starts. And our ranch is right in the middle of it. Which means they're not going to stop. They can't afford to." He stood, walked to the window, stared out at the snow-covered valley. "Eliza, I need you to be honest with me. Are you willing to fight this? Really fight, knowing it could cost us everything? She went to him, stood beside him at the window. I already told you, I'm not going anywhere. This is our home, our life. If we have to fight for it, then we fight. It could get dangerous, barn fires, more dead stock, maybe worse. Oh, then we'll be ready. She took his hand. Garrett, look at me. When he did, she held his gaze. I didn't come all this way, didn't leave everything I knew, didn't marry you and build this life just to give up at the first real challenge. We're stronger together than they are separately, and we're going to win. How can you be so sure? Because we have something they don't. We have the truth on our side, and we have each other. She squeezed his hand. That's worth more than all their money and schemes combined. He pulled her close, held her tight, and for the first time since this all started, Garrett Masterson allowed himself to believe they might actually survive this. Not just survive. Win. All right, he said. Then we fight. But we do it smart. We gather every piece of evidence we can find. We get the sheriff on our side or we go over his head. And we make sure that when Dunbar falls, he falls hard enough that he can't get back up. Agreed. Eliza pulled back, looked up at him with those fierce eyes. So where do we start? We start by being very careful and very patient. Dunbar's going to make a mistake. They always do. And when he does, we'll be ready to catch him. Outside, the December wind howled across the valley, bringing snow and cold and the promise of a hard winter ahead. But inside by the fire, Garrett and Eliza Masterson stood together, planning their counterattack, refusing to surrender the life they were building. They'd come too far to give up now, and whatever happened next, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else, together. The mistake came 3 weeks later, in the form of a man named Samuel Garrett, who walked into Sheriff Brennan's office on a cold January morning and asked for protection. Garrett and Eliza were in town buying supplies when Chuck came running down Main Street, his face flushed with excitement. Boss, you need to get to the sheriff's office now. They found Brennan standing outside with his arms crossed, looking like a man who'd just swallowed something bitter. Inside, through the window, they could see a thin man in his 40s, nervous and pale, wringing his hands. Who is that? Garrett asked. That's your proof, Brennan said quietly. Name's Samuel Garrett. He's one of the men who stole your cattle. Eliza grabbed Garrett's arm. What? Showed up this morning, scared out of his mind. Says he wants to confess everything in exchange for leniency. Says he's got information about who hired him and why. Brennan looked at Garrett. Says he'll only talk if you're there to hear it. Wants to apologize to you directly. Garrett's jaw tightened. Let's hear what he has to say. Inside, Samuel Garrett stood when they entered, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand, fresh wounds wrapped in dirty bandages. Mr. Masterson, he began, his voice shaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what we did to you. Save your apologies and tell me who hired you. Samuel glanced at the sheriff, who nodded. It was Preacher Dunbar, him and his son-in-law, Richard Kemp. They approached us in a saloon in Butte City back in October. Said they had a job that would pay well, stealing cattle, making it look random. They gave us details about your ranch, your routine, when the hands would be checking which pastures. Why are you confessing now? Brennan asked. Samuel held up his mangled hand. Because they tried to kill me. Me and the other 2. We finished the job, got paid, thought we were done. But 3 days ago, someone ambushed our camp, killed Johnny and Tom, shot them in their sleep. I got away but lost 2 fingers to frostbite hiding in the mountains. His voice broke. They're cleaning up loose ends. I figured I'd rather take my chances with the law than wait for them to finish me off. You have proof Dunbar hired you? Garrett asked. I have this. Samuel pulled a folded paper from his coat. Letter from Kemp with instructions and half the payment up front, $50 each. Was supposed to get the rest after we delivered the cattle to a buyer in Wyoming. Brennan took the letter, read it, and his face went hard. This is enough for an arrest warrant, maybe more than one. There's something else, Samuel said. Dunbar's planning something bigger. I heard him and Kemp talking before we left Butte. Something about forcing you off your land before spring. Said they'd do whatever it took, burn you out if they had to. Eliza felt ice in her veins. When? Don't know exactly, but soon. They're running out of time for some reason. The railroad, Garrett said. Construction starts in April. They need to control the route before then. Brennan was already moving. I'm getting those warrants. Masterson, I need you to stay calm and let the law handle this. How long will warrants take? Day, maybe 2. Judge's in Helena. I'll have to wire him. 2 days is too long. If Dunbar knows his man turned on him, he'll run or destroy evidence or worse. Garrett looked at Eliza. We need to move faster. Masterson, don't do anything stupid, Brennan warned. You go after Dunbar without legal authority, you'll be the one in jail. Then get me that authority, today. Garrett's voice was steel, because with or without it, I'm ending this. By noon, the entire town knew Samuel Garrett had confessed. The whispers that had been against Garrett Masterson suddenly shifted, uncertainty creeping in. If the preacher really had hired thieves, if he really was behind the attacks, then everything they'd believed was a lie. Dunbar knew it too. Garrett watched from across the street as the preacher emerged from his house, spoke urgently with Richard Kemp, then both men disappeared inside. They were planning something, making decisions. Garrett could feel it. We need eyes on them, he told Chuck. Every move they make, I want to know about it. Already on it, boss. Got men watching both properties. Eliza appeared beside him, her expression thoughtful. They're going to run. Tonight, maybe tomorrow. They'll try to get out before the warrants arrive. Let them run. Running is an admission of guilt. No. She shook her head. If they run, they take the evidence with them. The financial records, the correspondence, everything we need to prove the full scope of what they've done. We need them to stay and face justice. How do we make them stay? She was quiet for a moment. Then her eyes lit with an idea that made Garrett nervous. We give them a reason to think they still have the upper hand, make them believe we're weaker than we are. I'm not following. Tonight, you and I are going to have a very loud, very public argument about leaving, about selling the ranch and getting out before we lose everything. She grabbed his hand. We stage it at the hotel dining room, where half the town eats dinner. Let people see us fighting. Let word get back to Dunbar that we're breaking, that we're giving up. You want to lie to the whole town? I want to buy time for those warrants to arrive. And I want Dunbar confident enough to stay put while we build our case. She squeezed his hand. Trust me, it'll work. Garrett looked at his wife, at the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the determination that had carried them this far, and made a decision. All right, but you better be a good actress. I survived 3 years with my uncle's brother. I can fake anything. That evening, Garrett and Eliza walked into the Caldwell Hotel dining room and took a table in the center of the room where everyone could see them. The room was half full and conversation died the moment they entered. They ordered dinner, ate in tense silence, and then Eliza set down her fork with enough force to make it clatter. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice carrying across the room. I can't live like this, wondering when the next attack will come. Keep your voice down, Garrett said, playing his part. Why? So these people can keep pretending they don't know what's happening? She stood, and every eye in the room fixed on her. Your precious preacher Dunbar has been terrorizing us for months, stealing our cattle, killing our stock. And for what? Land he thinks he's entitled to? Eliza, sit down. No, I'm done sitting down. I'm done being quiet. She turned to face the room. You all know what's happening. You've known all along, but you're too afraid of Dunbar to speak up. Too afraid he'll come after you next. Mrs. Donnelly, sitting 2 tables over, flushed red. Now see here. I will not see here, Eliza snapped. I came to this town hoping for a fresh start. I married a good man who works harder than anyone I've ever met. And what did we get? Suspicion, gossip, attacks on our livelihood. She looked back at Garrett. I want to leave. Sell the ranch and go somewhere where people aren't small-minded and cruel. It's our home, Garrett said quietly. It's not a home when we're constantly under siege. Her voice broke convincingly. I'm tired, Garrett. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of being strong. I just want peace. She turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving Garrett sitting alone. He waited a beat, then stood and followed her, not looking at anyone as he left. Outside, in the cold January night, Eliza was waiting around the corner, grinning. How was I? Terrifying. Remind me never to actually make you angry. He pulled her close. You think they bought it? Every word. By morning, Dunbar will hear that we're ready to break. He'll think he's won. They were right. By the next afternoon, Richard Kemp had approached Garrett with an offer to buy the ranch, not through Mountain Valley Development, but through a private buyer Kemp represented. The offer was insulting, half what the land was worth, but Garrett pretended to consider it. I need time, he told Kemp. Need to discuss it with my wife. Don't take too long, Kemp said with barely concealed smugness. Offer expires in 3 days. The warrants arrived that evening, delivered by a territorial marshal from Helena. Sheriff Brennan had 3 pieces of paper that gave him authority to arrest Preacher Dunbar, Richard Kemp, and to search their properties for evidence of conspiracy to commit theft and attempted murder. When do you want to do this? Brennan asked Garrett. Tomorrow morning, early, before they're awake and ready. Garrett looked at the marshal, a hard-eyed man named Cole. You'll be there? Wouldn't miss it. Cole checked his pistol. Men like Dunbar think they're above the law. I enjoy proving them wrong. That night, Garrett and Eliza sat on their porch, despite the cold, wrapped in blankets, watching stars wheel overhead. This time tomorrow, it'll be over, she said quietly. One way or another. Are you afraid? Terrified. He looked at her. Not of Dunbar, not of losing the ranch, but of something happening to you. If this goes wrong, if he's desperate enough, nothing's going to happen to me. I'll be right here, safely away from everything. Promise me you'll stay here tomorrow, no matter what you hear. She was quiet for a long moment. I promise. But Garrett, you promise me something too. Come back to me safe. I will. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. I love you, Eliza. I should have said it sooner, but I'm saying it now. I love you. Her eyes shone with tears in the starlight. I love you too. Have for weeks, maybe longer. I was just waiting for you to catch up. They held each other in the cold Montana night, 2 people who'd found each other through desperation and built something real from nothing but hope and stubborn determination. Whatever tomorrow brought, they'd face it together. The arrests happened at dawn. Garrett rode with Sheriff Brennan, Marshal Cole, and 4 deputies splitting into 2 groups. Half went to Kemp's house, half to Dunbar's. They hit both properties simultaneously, warrants in hand, guns ready. Kemp tried to run out the back door and was caught before he made it 10 feet. Dunbar, to his credit, didn't run. He sat at his breakfast table, calmly eating eggs, and looked up at the sheriff with something like resignation. I suppose this was inevitable, he said. Preacher Dunbar, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit theft, attempted murder, and fraud. Brennan gestured to his deputies. Search the house, carefully. They found the evidence in Dunbar's study. Ledgers showing payments to Samuel Garrett and his partners. Correspondence with Kemp about Mountain Valley Development and the railroad deal. Letters from lawyers detailing the plan to acquire the Eastern Valley properties. Even a partial map showing the proposed route with the Masterson Ranch circled in red. It was damning, all of it. Dunbar looked at Garrett across his study, something bitter in his expression. You should have just sold. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. It was never for sale. Not to you, not to anyone. Stubborn fool. You could have been rich, could have moved to San Francisco, started over, lived easy. I didn't want easy. I wanted what was mine. Garrett leaned forward. You thought you could break me because everyone else did. Because I'm alone. Because I don't have family or friends in high places. But you forgot something, preacher. I'm not alone anymore. I have a wife who's smarter and tougher than you ever gave her credit for. And together, we're stronger than all your schemes and money combined. That mail-order bride? Dunbar laughed, harsh and mocking. That desperate woman who came running from Kentucky? That woman, Garrett said quietly, is worth 10 of you. And she's the reason you're going to jail instead of me being run off my land. Remember that when you're sitting in a cell. They took Dunbar and Kemp to the jail, processed them, locked them in separate cells. Samuel Garrett's testimony, combined with the documentary evidence, was enough to ensure both men would stand trial. The judge, when he arrived from Helena 2 weeks later, denied bail, citing flight risk and the severity of the charges. The trial took 3 days. The whole town came to watch, packing the small courthouse to capacity. Samuel Garrett testified first, laying out the entire scheme in painful detail. Then came the financial records, the letters, the map. Garrett took the stand and described the attacks on his ranch, the stolen cattle, the murdered bulls. And Eliza testified too. She walked the jury through what she'd discovered about Mountain Valley development, about the pattern of land grabs, about the intimidation and tax manipulation. She spoke clearly and firmly, never wavering even when Dunbar's lawyer tried to rattle her with questions about her background, her hasty marriage, her motives. "My motive," she said, looking directly at the jury, "was to build a life worth living, to stand beside my husband and create something good and real. These men tried to destroy that. They tried to take what wasn't theirs through lies and violence. That's why I'm here, to make sure they don't get away with it." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the verdict was guilty on all counts. Dunbar got 15 years, Kemp got 12. Mountain Valley Development was dissolved, its assets seized to compensate the ranchers who'd been forced to sell. Garrett and Eliza stood outside the courthouse as the sun set, watching Dunbar being led away in chains. The preacher looked old suddenly, diminished, all his power and confidence stripped away. "It's really over," Eliza said softly. "It's really over." Garrett pulled her close. "We won. We survived. There's a difference. Then we'll do more than survive. We'll thrive." He tilted her face up to look at him. "I meant what I said that night. I love you, Eliza Masterson, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you." "You already have." She kissed him, soft and sweet. "Every day you fight for us, you prove it. Every time you trust me, respect me, stand beside me. That's love, Garrett. Real love." They rode home as the stars came out. The valley spread before them in silver moonlight. Their valley. Their home. Hard-won and worth every moment of struggle. The town's opinion shifted slowly over the following months. Some people apologized, sheepish and awkward. Others just started treating Garrett and Eliza with the respect they'd earned. Mrs. Harper began saving back special items for Eliza, giving her first pick of new fabric and supplies. Mary Dawson organized a quilting circle and invited Eliza to join. Even the new preacher who came to replace Dunbar made a point of welcoming them warmly. But the real change came from within. Garrett smiled more, laughed occasionally, started attending town meetings and actually participating instead of sitting in hostile silence. Eliza bloomed under the security and love, her sharp mind finding new challenges and helping Garrett expand the ranch operations, in building relationships with other ranchers' wives, in making their house truly feel like home. On a warm April evening, 6 months after the trial, Garrett came in from the fields to find Eliza sitting on the porch with a strange expression on her face. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, alert for trouble. "Nothing's wrong." She smiled, took his hand, placed it on her stomach. "Everything's right. More than right." It took him a moment to understand. When he did, his eyes went wide. "You're pregnant. About 3 months, I think." Her smile widened at his shock. "Surprised?" "Terrified. Amazed. Happy." He knelt in front of her, his hand still on her belly. "A baby. Our baby. Due in October, best I can figure." She touched his face. "Are you happy?" "I'm beyond happy. He struggled for words. "I never thought I'd have this. A wife, a family, a real home. I thought I'd die alone on this ranch with nothing but work to show for my life." "Well, you're not dying anytime soon. You're going to live a long life and teach our children to be as stubborn and strong as their father." She pulled him up into her arms. "And I'm going to love you every day of it. Even when I'm old and cranky? Especially then. You're already cranky, might as well add old to it." He laughed, really laughed, and kissed her until they were both breathless. 2 years later, Garrett sat on that same porch, their daughter Rose sleeping against his chest, watching Eliza teach their son Jacob to walk in the yard. The boy was 14 months old, determined and fearless, falling down and getting back up with single-minded focus. "He's got your stubbornness," Eliza called over. "He's got your brains. That's more valuable." She scooped Jacob up as he stumbled, blew raspberries on his belly until he shrieked with laughter, then carried him over to the porch. Garrett made room, and she settled beside him, Jacob on her lap, all of them watching the sun set over the valley. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked quietly. "If we'd both made different choices?" "Every day. And every day I'm grateful we didn't." He shifted Rose to one arm so he could put the other around Eliza. "You saved me, from myself, from loneliness, from becoming everything this town thought I was." "We saved each other." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was running from fear when I came here. You were running from pain. We found each other in the running, and we stopped together, built something instead of just surviving. Best thing I ever did was place that advertisement. Best thing I ever did was answer it." She smiled up at him. "Even though you were terrible at writing romantic letters." "I wasn't trying to be romantic. I was trying to be honest." "I know. That's why I came." She kissed him softly. "Honesty and respect and partnership. That's what we promised each other. That's what we built." Rose stirred, made a small sound, and settled back into sleep. Jacob was already dozing on Eliza's lap, worn out from his walking practice. The ranch stretched out around them, 1,500 acres of land they'd fought for and kept, land they'd pass on to their children someday. In town, people who'd once whispered about the mail-order bride and the cold rancher now pointed to them as an example. The Mastersons, who'd stood together through scandal and attack and come out stronger. The couple who'd proved that sometimes the best love stories weren't the ones that started with flowers and poetry, but the ones that started with honesty and grew into something unbreakable. Mrs. Harper had brought by a jar of peaches the week before, an offering of true friendship finally earned. Mary Dawson came by twice a week to help with the children and trade recipes. Even old Frank Mercer had stopped his whittling long enough to carve a set of wooden animals for Rose. The town hadn't given them their happiness. They'd built it themselves, day by day, choice by choice, standing together when it would have been easier to fall apart. "I love you," Garrett said into the gathering darkness. "I love you." Eliza's hand found his. "Always have. Always will." They sat there as the stars came out, a family forged from desperation and hope, as real and solid as the mountains around them. The mail-order bride and the lonely rancher who'd become so much more than their circumstances, who'd become partners, lovers, parents, the foundation of something that would outlast them both. And in the quiet of that Montana evening, with their children sleeping and their hands linked and their future stretching bright before them, Garrett and Eliza Masterson knew they'd found what they'd both been searching for. Not perfection, not ease, but something better. They'd found home. Sonnet 4.5